So, Bob, what have you been doing since you retired from your role as Mayor of the Sunshine Coast Regional Council?
As little as possible, really. I do run a mentoring program, and it was good to hear that stuff that we just heard now. So I think mentoring is a wonderful way of transferring knowledge and creating opportunities for others. And I was lucky enough to have a mentor called Don Syme that I was talking to Val Smart about before, back in the early 80s. And he was a wonderful guy, an old smoke signal socialist, but he was a great guy and it's taught me a lot. So I've been running around with the 44 new mayors that we have in Queensland. It's been quite a hectic time, but I've had some real success, sort of talking them through some of their problems and giving them a bit of incentive and a bit of knowledge, mainly about themselves more than anything.
But Bob, I mean, how do you go about giving a mayor some of the wisdom that you've accumulated throughout your career? I mean, that's a pretty heavy thing to sort of have to hand over in half an hour or whatever you give them.
Well, for a while it was a bit like artificial insemination. They knew they were getting screwed, they just didn't know how it was happening. Yes, it was sort of, you've got to approach it gently. It's like someone who is successful in a business talking to somebody who's new in the business who knows they're going to be successful and doesn't necessarily want to do it your way. So I didn't talk to them about how I did the stuff. I mean, it wasn't a mirror image of me that I was trying to create. What I talked to them about was their ability to manage, their ability to lead, their ability to really become part of their communities and get an understanding of what's going on around them. And I talked to them about integrity and honesty, all of those sorts of things. I just gave them a few ideas on where the traps are, the big holes to fall in, the big holes to avoid. And so it was really about themselves more than anything. This business, I've often said the mayor's job can be a very lonely job. And there's 6, 8, 10 councillors that want your job, and there's 20,000 people out there in the community that want your throat.
Yeah.
So it can be a very lonely job, but it's very fruitful if you do it properly. And someone asked me once after about 25 years in this business, why do you keep doing it? And I came up, the one thought I had was that every now and then someone says thank you. That's really an amazing feeling. Every now and then someone says thank you. And those sorts of things in your business, it's similar. If someone says thank you for the level of service that you've just provided, and you've worked bloody hard at providing it, and it's a real pleasure to receive that thank you and makes you work harder next time.
Russell Green just withdrew his indication that he was going to stand for the mayor. Was that a surprise to you when he withdrew?
Yes, it was to a degree, for about 30 seconds, because I thought Russell was going to go through with it. But I was only going on the Russell that I really knew 18 months ago. I hadn't experienced what he's experienced in that council for the last 18 months. I hadn't been through what he'd been through. So it didn't take me all that long to go from being surprised to understanding, because, I've been there, done that stuff, and it was a pretty amazing sort of a walk for me in that 4 years. But I can understand that he did it, and I think why he did it, and I can understand. And I was in high praise of him doing it when he did. He could have fuzzed around and not done it until the last minute, but he did. He made the decision early and went.
In part of his announcement, he said that being a councillor, not even just a mayor, but being a councillor, for him had been a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job. Do you agree with that concept? Is that true, that it is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job? When you're paying somebody $110,000, $120,000, yes, you expect it. Yeah.
If they're working for 2 and 6, then it may not be a full-time job. But that sort of money, I would expect, and I did expect, a councillor to commit as much as possible. And it's the old saying, some commit more than others, but some are more busy than others doing nothing.
So you think that Julia Gillard was worth every penny more than Obama gets? We won't answer that one.
No, don't go on there. Who's Julia Gillard?
How do you cope with people, or how did you cope? I'm sure you still get them, but people just barraging you with questions and complaints and sometimes even compliments. How do you deal with that on a daily, hourly basis?
Oh, I always used to say there's only two types of people in the world that I can't stand, and hypocrites are both of them. I can deal with really anybody. I really don't care. You know, what other people think of me is not my business, it's theirs. So if they want to judge me through their values, that's their problem. If they want to stand and talk to me about their issues and want to try and resolve it, then we can share the problem. But hypocrites are, just abysmal people, and I can't abide them and I can't talk to them. So everyone else I've always been able to manage to find a bit of common ground. I'm not one to make small talk. I'm not a small talk person. I can talk issues over, but once it's done, and I've got to move on. I can't talk around talking crap all night to people about nothing.
Oh, how much of your job, or how much of a mayor's job, do you think is entrepreneurial, and how much do you think it is actual leadership?
I used to say that my job was 20% hard work and 80% theatre. I think there's sort of a split in a council, you know, and the mayor's above the line, and the mayor's always looking up. The mayor's looking forward, the mayor's looking outwards, where the councillors tend to be looking inwards and tend to be working inwards and localising a lot of their staff. So yeah, the mayor's got to be somewhat entrepreneurial, and you could do that in a multitude of ways. You know, Noel Playford was considerably entrepreneurial in the environment world when he was here, when he was mayor before. I was more entrepreneurial in the community development world. Entrepreneur's not just about economy, it's about flair and it's about ability and it's about purpose, I suppose. There was a natural flow on from what Noel did to what I did to what I'd hoped Mark Jamieson would be doing on the Sunshine Coast. I thought he was a natural fit to move on after I left, but he's got another couple of years to try and prove that.
We've, at the moment, apparently, even though, the candidates haven't really been called, but apparently we've got two candidates for mayor at the moment. One is Noel Playford and the other one is a lady doctor, excuse me, I can't remember her name. Pearson. Have you got a view on both of those candidates?
Noel's Noel. I've known Noel since about 1980, born and bred in the district. I've said years ago he would go down, and Noosa was the all-time great mayor. He put us where we were, along with some tough old nuts like Val Smark and Michael Gloucester and Toss Barnett, Peter Bycroft and God knows who else. In that first 1982 to 85 council, we didn't do an apprenticeship, we were blooded, to be quite honest, and it was a tough time. But it was a time where Noel learnt how to do those things and knew what was important to this place, and he put us there. But what Noel didn't understand was the community's capacity to carry that through, and I did, so I was a natural flow on from that. And I think there's great opportunity here now, and we probably move to another question you were going to ask, but it's a great opportunity here now to set some real strong base for over the next 2 years for the future.
So what about a lady mayor?
Absolutely.
That one as a lady mayor?
No. Look, I'll put it to you this way. I don't want to be derogatory to the person, but she stopped me in the street one day and talked to me, and I spent some time with her talking about policy and things to do and how to get attention and blah, blah, blah. And she's not done one of them. I told her things that she needed to do, and she talked about being an independent. And I said, well, if you want to be independent and not do what all the other politicians done, you're going to have to stop looking and acting like one. And she's still looking and acting like one.
But how can you not act and look like a politician when you are?
Do I look like a politician?
No.
It's one of the things I used to say. People say, how can you be the mayor of Noosa? All those bloody rich bastards up there elect a bloke like you. I elected a bloke like me because I talked to most of the people up here, and 95% of them were working class just like I was. So, you don't have to be a politician. I mean, I had a theory. Basically, my whole life as a councillor and a mayor, a lot of councillors won't accept the fact that they're politicians, but they're a politician by definition, they're a politician by trade, and they won't accept the fact that they're a politician because of the reputation politicians have. I took the opposite view. I think that a politician should be an honourable profession. It should be an honourable profession, and I worked for 30 years trying to prove that point. So that's the difference between what I do and what most politicians are good people, don't get me wrong, but we've got a crew in this country and every other country in the world that give them all a bad name, and the people that do work hard never get the recognition they deserve. So
you're asking us to separate them from real estate agents, used car salesmen, most of the clergy, bank managers, sorry Scott, and a few other people that we love to beat up in the community. Is that right?
No, I know some lovely bank managers. Given me a lot of money over the years.
You didn't mention any of the others I asked about.
I know some lovely real estate agents and some lovely people who sold me some wonderful cars up at Gary Crick's up the road here.
Yep.
Wonderful people.
And the
Gary
Medill
Crick's.
boys, don't forget the Medills.
And the brothers Medill.
So there are a few people in this the new council that are sort of hovering around in the background that have been around the block before. People that you know, some of the old people. I'm not just talking about councillors, I'm talking about other people that were in the infrastructure of the council. What do you think their role would be, and do you think that we need them back to help with this transition?
Oh, you certainly need a mix, that's for sure. I reckon, taking the mayor aside, you'll have 6 councillors, all elected at large, which I think is absolutely wonderful. I think you need a mix, either be 3 all or 2 4 either way. I don't mind, but I think you need some old, you need some new. Old sort of war horses like me, for all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be putting my hand up even if I do. There should be people smarter and brighter and quicker and faster and better at doing what I do in this community.
But how do you encourage people like that, Bob? I mean, how do you get somebody that has never been in supposed public office or as a politician, as you say, to want to be one for a start? And also, how do they go about it?
Look, I think it's in your blood. I didn't know I was ever going to be a politician, but I was always interested in politics, and my father-in-law said to my then wife that I would be in politics within 3 years of leaving Brisbane in 1978. He was out by 1 year. It was 1982 I went in. But I think it's just in your blood. It's the way you talk, the way you think. The real people that you should be approaching or talking to or encouraging are those people who work hard in community groups. They actually understand the dynamics of a community, understand where real power comes from, and that's from the people who work around them. Talk to people that run good businesses that. I've probably got a bit of the time, things are different.
That's one of the issues though, Bob, isn't it? I mean, when you're talking about the pay scale of the Sunshine Coast Regional councillors, our new councillors are not going to be paid that amount. So it's not enough particularly to draw somebody away from their business unless they're like some businesses in town are not making a dosh. But
look, to be quite honest,
how do you get someone that is in small business to first of all give enough time up, and how do they sustain themselves financially?
To be quite honest, the level 4 or whatever it is council, I think it's 50 grand a year, so it's not a great deal of money. It's a part-time job in all fairness, and that's the way you'd have to treat it. I said that about the Sunshine Coast Regional Councils before because I think that's what they deserve to be doing, because that's what they get paid for. I mean, they get paid extremely well, really well. From an old sort of working class man like me, it's good money. But this is not. So I said to some people the other day, how are you going to handle it? And I said, well, if I can't do what a council's actually supposed to be doing in half a day a week, I'll give it up.
So do you honestly think that that if we're going to encourage new blood, fresh blood into the council by way of councillors, that we can get the right sort of people that would put up supposedly half a day a week, knowing it's probably more like 2 or 3 days a week in reality, for 50 grand a year?
I did it for $7,000.
$1,000 a year?
$7,000 a year I got paid in 1982. And I was making about $23,000 or $24,000 a year in my electrical contracting business. Val probably worked for 4 because he was in the term before me, and he was a full-time practicing accountant. It's in your blood. You're either going to do it or you're not. I mean, you can, if it's about the money, then it's out the door. It's not what it's about.
You were our mayor for how long in the Noosa Council?
Oh, some people said too long, but 11 years.
11 years. Sounds too long to me, but anyway.
You're only 10 for murder.
After that, you suddenly got jettisoned into this super council, which is one of the biggest councils in Australia, biggest amalgamated councils in Australia. So here's Bob that always thought, like, how the heck did I get into this position in the first place? Suddenly running one of the biggest corporations in Australia, and you did that for 4 years. Would you say that they were hard?
They're the hardest bloody years of my life. Listen, I didn't get jettisoned into it. I put myself in there, and I worked bloody hard to do it, spent a lot of other people's money along the way. But we did it. And I did it for that same reason, that passion for who I am and where I live and the people around me. And it was a tough time. We had 3 jobs to do. We had business as usual in all the 3 regions. We had the future stuff, all that, how are we going to operate in the future, and then the restructure as well. So basically had 3 different parallel job things happening in front of us. And yeah, it was, it was an in-the-office job for me, probably 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then it was an out-of-the-office job for me, probably 5 or 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then you go home and try and sleep. So, but, you've got to do it, and you've got to say to yourself, well, this is my job. And that's what I'm going to say something about Mark now. I saw my job in that first 4 years as actually setting the foundation. I saw my job as just setting up an organisation that actually could survive into the future with a bit of a vision. And I've sat and watched quietly, and that vision has started to take some leaps forward. And I thought Mark Jamieson, with his history in business, he was the right person to take a lot of that stuff forward. And I think he will eventually get it. But, the problem that you face as the mayor, you're dragging 12 anchors in the Sunshine Coast Regional Council, there'll be 6 in this. And you've got to try and get the councillors to work through it. And Mark's major problem, he's still got 6 of those anchors that I had.
Yeah.
So,
And Bob, some of the things that you, obviously when you're in a mayoral position, you're very instrumental in the planning, forward planning for the region, not just in the immediate future. So there are things that you must have implemented in the planning stage that are still being carried through by Mark.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm just thinking of things like maybe the Sunshine Coast Airport.
Yeah, Sunshine Coast Airport, Maroochy Town Centre, Caloundra South, what was the Rural Futures Program, and on it goes. They're all there, and they're all starting to turn a bit of water now. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff. But how do you do it? You surround yourself with people smarter than you are. That's the trick.
God, I wish I could find some.
It's not difficult for me, darling, believe me. I fail grade 10. That's the reality with me. I failed grade 10. I managed to pass 1 exam in 3 years of college. But it's always my intuition that's got me through, and some bloody good floggings along the way. But, I failed grade 10 and I became basically what could be the chairman of the board of directors of a company with nearly 3,000 employees.
What was your budget?
Is $750 million a year turnover budget and $5.6 billion worth of assets.
Not bad.
300,000 shareholders though. And everyone knew me personally.
But Bob, just going back to the Sunshine Coast Airport, because this is something that has been ever present in my time in Noosa in Australia. Really, Noosa is a tourist region. We can't survive without tourism, and one of the biggest draw cards should be the airport or the traffic coming in from the airport. But I remember back in the day, I don't know what the stats are now, but it was about 79% of all visitors to Noosa were not coming in by air. They were actually coming in from
I'll tell you a story. There was a couple of Maroochy councillors a number of years ago, not long after I became mayor, walked into my office up here and demanded that we pay a contribution to the Maroochy Airport, as they called it in those days. And I said, well, we do. And they said, no, you don't. I said, yes, we do. We give you 70% of your customers and they're all paying $10 when they come through the door. So, if it wasn't for the Noosa public coming, or the Noosa traveller coming in through that airport in those days, they would have gone broke. That's the reality of it. But it is a major, it was one of the things that we actually picked on. We spent considerable amount of time. When I first got in there, I would have sold it. Honestly, I would have sold the bloody thing. It was losing $9 million a year, or had lost $9 million over the previous 3 years. And it's the board of directors of that company were the 12 councillors on the Maroochy Council, so you can understand why. They were making some awful decisions on the bloody thing. But the previous mayor, God bless his soul, Joe Natoli, my old mate, he actually swung it right at the death to put a proper board in there and operate it. And by the time I got there, things had started to turn around. And I spent some time working with the general manager down there, because he knew I was going to sell it. He knew I would sell it if I had got a chance. And he knew I'd been contacted about buying it. So we spent some time having a look through it. The reality is that thing in the future is probably worth around about $25 to $30 million a year in actual profit to the Sunshine Coast community or to the owners of that airport in 10 to 15 years' time. That's the reality of it. The guy that's managing it's doing a fabulous job, but you're going to have to get some sort of, I don't know, venture partner or something in there to make that. It's $300 million to spend on the runway alone.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then you've got to build a new terminal, blah, 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 blah. But that's all planned for, and it's been not budgeted for, but it's got long-term financial plans in place that you to work out how to get the money. But that's only one of the things, I mean, the airport's not just about people flying in and flying out. The airport's about avionics, aeronautics, blah, 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 construction, maintenance, blah, blah, blah.
They've got training schools and so forth there as well.
Yeah.
But just getting back to Mark Jamieson for a minute, I mean, with the lead up to the de-amalgamation, through his column in the papers and, comments that he'd made to the media, he clearly wasn't in favour of us moving away from the Sunshine Coast Regional Council. What do you think his concerns are or were about us pulling away from the council?
I wouldn't want to put words into Mark's mouth, but, I suppose, Val, it might be like letting Hastings Street go away. We're the milking cow. We're worth a lot of value to the Sunshine Coast. We always will be worth a lot of value to the Sunshine Coast, and there's a bit of a jewel in the crown thing happening, so there's a bit of that. Economies of scale. That's.
So we were and still are the smallest of the three shires.
Yeah.
So
But we pay 21% of the rates.
Right. So that's one of the things. And speaking.
Oh yeah. Look, don't get me wrong. It's only one of many things, but. And I don't want to put words in Mark's mouth, but I can understand his position, the economies of scale, and operating as a whole are far more beneficial than having a split. I mean, any accountant can work that through. So I think there's a lot of that in it. And there's a lot of, there were quite a few things that were going fairly well regionally in business. The Chambers of Commerce are working together really well. Up until a couple of months ago, the tourism people are working pretty well. But and there's been a lot of interaction in all sorts of spheres, in sport, in culture, libraries, all that stuff's worked really well. And my advice to this community is just don't let that go. Don't let that go. You're going to have a bloody economy of scale issue as well.
But Bob, out of the voting public of Noosa, 81% or close to 81% of us said that we wanted to choose de-amalgamation. So there were 19% of the population that were either not sure or absolutely dead against it. Why do you think that was?
Oh, I'd say it was 10% of people who didn't vote for it in the first place, and half the people have come here since. I don't think there's any rationale to it other than that, to be quite honest.
Well, I think one of the biggest sort of fear factors that's been brought up to me anyway is people are terrified that now that we're pulling away, that there's going to be a massive hike in rates. What do you think about that?
No, won't be a massive hike in rates. Yes, rates will increase, but they would have if you stayed where you were. I don't think it's going to be all that much different than what you would have had we stayed in the Sunshine Coast Regional Council, to be quite honest. Yes, there'll be some bills to pay, but you're all into sort of what's the word? Non-traditional accounting methods. There'll be a lot of that stuff happen. You can bet your life on that. They'll be pushing money here and pushing money out there, and pulling a bit of savings in here, and there'll be all that sort of stuff happening. It'll be like 2 years of a federal election campaign.
Can we trust the Sunshine Coast Regional Council to give back what was ours in the first place and not take some of the things that we might need back?
Well, they don't have to.
So you mean we just have to go on their good nature?
Look, the rules are the rules. Excuse me, I get a bit dry. The rules are the rules, and generosity's not part of the rules. They've got their own issues. We had 4 years in that council. 3 years of those we weren't allowed to move anybody on, so we were paying a large number of people a large amount of money that weren't doing anything because we couldn't get rid of them. They're trying to resolve that issue themselves now. We'll wear a bit of that. We'll have to wear a bit of that flag. When I say we, I mean the community, through their council, whoever it is. Look, I honestly don't think John Naggs is the sort of guy that's deliberately going to go out and screw us. I think he'll try and be fair. I don't think Mark's the sort of guy that wants to do that either. Mark Jamieson, he's trying to make his business stack up. It's the same as we're going to try and make our business stack up in the future.
What about our town plan? Is that
It's locked in.
It's locked in from before we amalgamated,
Yep.
and it will stay. So we're not
Town
going to
plans is only as good as the people who elect.
Right,
Yeah,
so loads of traffic lights, parking meters, multi-storey.
All that policy stuff is all basically locked in. There are some variations to do along the way. There were some changes to the local government laws, but minimal. There's some things happened to the signage policy I didn't like, but we've got to bring them back, and we can do whatever we want with them on the way back. But I think money's the great issue here. That's the question a lot of people asked. And when I first started talking about this, I was still the mayor, and I said somewhere between 8 and 16 million then, and that was without knowing what was going on. It looks like it could cost us somewhere between 8 and 12. Those figures sound familiar, Smarty? And with a bit of creative accounting, I don't think it's going to be all that sort of difficult to do, to be quite honest. I'm the worst budgeter in the world. But Jesus, I've worked
Doesn't
with
that
some
go with the
smart
territory?
people in the past. You know, that's what this is all about, folks. It's not about the mayor or the councillors being smart enough to do this stuff. It's about the mayor and the councillors actually having great staff around them. And for, you know, probably for the last 15 years of my life as a politician in Noosa, I was really lucky. We were surrounded by some brilliant people, and that's where we are, where we were.
Bob, I've got a few more questions I want to ask, but I think that at this stage I just want to ask if there's anybody that wants to ask Bob a particular question that I might not have raised so far. It's a pretty good opportunity to ask him anything that you want. You got something, John?
Yeah, I just want to ask Bob, with his background and experience, what his vision is for the new council as far as small business is concerned. Where would you like to see the council interact with small business, and what's his vision? What's on the horizon for small business in the Noosa area?
Yeah, John. Look, I just watching some of the stuff that Noel Plaid was talking about the other day in the paper. He seems to be making the right noises about, you know, trying to change the economy. I mean, we all know what is the underpinning industry here. Always will be the major industry, tourism. But we've got to find a different way of doing business. We've got to find, I think, some stronger non-tourist businesses to come into place. And, you know, one of the things we did many years ago was Greg's Central Queensland University in here. You know, that's the sort of stuff that we can do. But the support on average, the average punter in business, you know, selling hot dogs, coffee or chips, or real estate or motor cars, I think that's about relationship stuff. And one of the problems we had in the past, when I first became mayor, one of the things that I said was really difficult about this place is I couldn't look over my shoulder and see the president of the Chamber of Commerce and talk to them because there wasn't one. Okay, and then we finally got one, a major Chamber of Commerce, and it got shanghaied. You know, it became an advocacy group for those who didn't, rather than a communication group for those who did.
Well, how do you think that the Noosa Chamber of Commerce now, in its present structure, how do you think that we can help the new council get something going for small business?
Talk.
And how can the council help us
Talk.
to promote ourselves
Talk.
to each other?
Act like a female and talk. I mean, it's the only way I've ever achieved something is talk. I mean, I'm Noel Playford once said to me, the only thing that's wrong with you, Bob Abbott, is you want everybody to love you. And that may well be true.
Noel never worried about that, did he?
No. Well, we're all different in the way we do business, but the reason I could talk to everybody was because I used to say, well, I've never had an original thought in my life, and everything I've ever done, someone else has told me how to do it. So, you know, it's talk. And while there's a Chamber of Commerce in here that's willing to talk, then there will be people on the council that will be willing to talk with you. And that's what you need. If you don't get the communication happening, you don't get anything happening.
Speaking of talking, the Friends of Noosa, which then turned into the Noosa Independence Alliance and what have you, they didn't stop talking for the whole 6 years that we were away. What do you think about their input, and do you think that we would have had de-amalgamation had it not been for their constant talk?
I think, just to explain that, the Friends of Noosa were formed basically the day after the decision was made to amalgamate us, and I was there when it happened, and they have been constant. Other things have happened along the way, like the formation of the NIA. The NIA was merely an amalgam of a number of different local groups, Friends of Noosa only being one of them. But they've been constant, you know, the likes of Bob Ansett, Jim Barato, you know, just people selling raffle tickets, talking, keeping the pressure on, blah, 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 blah. And they're the people, and I was only talking to Jim Barato last night, but they're the people that once this election is over will slip back into their normal lives, whatever a normal life is. For Jim Barato, I wouldn't have a clue, because he always seems to be jumping up somewhere. But yeah, they're the people that slip away, and I look, more power to them. They've done a great job. Sometimes I just used to roll my eyes, I'm sick of it, blah, 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 blah. But they never got sick of it. They never gave up, and more power to them, and we've got what we've got because of that, So I've got a great admiration for them.
Noosa's economy in the last sort of at least 3 years, 4 years maybe, has suffered pretty badly. I know that everybody else in the world sort of claiming the same problems, but our local businesses have suffered, and it's sort of more to what John was asking is, we've had not just the global financial downturn, but we've also had a lot of our tradesmen from the coast leaving to go to the mines, which has had a devastating effect on my business because I'm in the building industry, and a lot of people are in the building and housing industry or allied industries to that, is that losing talent from the coast doesn't necessarily mean when the mining industry has a downturn that they're going to come back, or even if we're able to accommodate them if they decide to come back. So I'm not just talking about the people that have left to go to the mines, but there has been a devastating effect across the board, including things like that have had an effect on us. How can this new council, with help from people like the Noosa Chamber of Commerce, how can we help ourselves to get better?
Again, I think it's about talk. It's about partnerships. One of the things we did very successfully with the community groups, the sporting groups, was actually set up a self-help program where the associations could get in and do some of their own work, and we'd help them with that. We'd pay them to do the stuff and save a considerable amount of money in the council as well. So, that relationship stuff is extremely important because you're not going to elect 7 people up in Pelican Street that business experts or economic development experts or any sort of experts really. You're gonna elect 7 normal everyday people. They won't have the answers. But look what happened with the tourism industry. When we started to talk to the tourism industry, we were spending $300,000 a year of ratepayers' money promoting Noosa out in the big wide wonderful world back in late 90s, early 2000s, late 90s. When we got together with the tourism industry and said, look, why don't you guys actually do the marketing, because we can't market. We're politicians, for Christ's sake. We can only market ourselves. We're not in the business of marketing, we're in the business of politicking. So we came up then with this levy scheme where they raised considerable amount more money than we were ever going to find to give them, and said, you go out and do the marketing yourselves. Well, that's the sort of thing that we've got to do here. We've got to get that sort of partnership, that sort of arrangement happening where we can work with the Chamber of Commerce and actually probably hand some of that responsibility out. You're the experts, not me. I've run one business in my life. I was a one-man show, and the best I ever did was about $70,000 worth of electrical work, most of it from $25 jobs. So I'm no businessman, never have been.
Well, Bob, whatever you are, you're an inspiration. You've been an absolutely huge part of our development as a community and as a town and as a region. And you really are an inspiration to me personally, and I think a lot of people here think a lot of you. So thanks so much for tonight, and I really appreciate what you've done. Thanks very much, Bob.
Thank you, Bill.